All right, Dr. Karen, thank you for coming in today.
Ryan, thanks for having me. This is so great.
It's been a long time coming. I think we've had you on the books for like a month.
Yeah, my schedule is pretty crazy in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way, but it gets pretty crazy.
If you're an entrepreneur or you're working for yourself and you have your own business, I think being busy is the best thing in the world, right?
Right. Because you could be like, well, I don't have any customers. You could be like that.
Yeah.
So, no, absolutely.
So obviously I'm familiar with your work and the work you do with couples and stuff like that, which I think is pretty exciting. Because obviously, we have I think we live in strange times.
Good way of putting it. I think I'm gonna take that strange. I think that's a great way of explaining what's happening in our world.
Yeah. Especially around relationships and marriage and couples and dating and all this kind of stuff. I think we've never had a more confusing time than right now with our access to reaching out to people, communicating with people. And being locked in homes with people, which we just came through. Yeah.
That was almost like 2 years, It wasn't really like 1 year of it. It was maybe 2.5, and a lot of people still stayed in after that. So
yeah. It's funny. I always say, like, during COVID, people either had a baby, got a dog, or got divorced.
But the bad part is they got a divorce and then still had to stay together. A lot of them stayed, right? Now they're divorced. They couldn't wait for 2022 or 2023 to hit. But yeah, it was a lot. Just like you said, it was just an strange time. I mean, the last time there was a pandemic was like 18, I want to say, somewhere in that.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So luckily we had the technology to get through it, I suppose. Working from home and all that stuff.
Yeah. My biggest thing is my husband and I were like, because everyone, I think, gained the COVID weight.
Right.
Yeah. And so we did a lot of eating. We did a lot of wine tasting because there were all kinds of virtual cool wine tasting and parties and things that you could do virtually. So we definitely kept busy we had quite an interesting social life, but that's what we spent a lot of time doing, is having these parties, again, with couples and connecting with people. And that was our way of doing it. We have a couple as a friend of ours that they were in Canada. And so every Sunday we would have dinner together.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
You have to get creative, and, we learned each other. We know each other. So everyone knows their operational style. So it works. Once you have a better understanding of people, then you're able to communicate better, which then can make better friends, make you a better person, all that wonderful.
I'm from Canada originally.
Really?
Yeah.
And I wish I could tell you kind of where. It was close to Toronto, where they are. But I love going there. We go visit them as often as we can. They probably come more to the States than we go there. But man, I love that.
Did you know there's more people who live in the state of California than living in all of Canada?
I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe that California, there's a lot of countries that could fall in that category for California.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I say countries, right?
Yeah. It's pretty wild living in Southern California now, because I've lived abroad for about 20 plus years and now just kind of come back to the U.S. and settling in and doing this and trying to bring an international perspective to, what's going on here in the United States and meeting, interesting and talented and inspiring people. It's been wonderful.
I bet. Yeah, this is a good job. You got a good gig here. This is great.
So I obviously want to get into all the work that you're doing and your books and your speaking and everything like that, but it's always nice to kind of figure out who you are.
Yeah.
So if we can go down memory lane.
Sure.
So where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Compton, California. Yeah, I grew up in LA area.
So 20 miles from here.
Yeah, no, really. I was, and it's so funny because if people ever meet me, of course, no one would peg that I'm from the inner city, but they, when I do say that, like, oh, really? I thought you were from the East Coast. I get that all the time.
You have East Coast vibes?
I guess so. I'm giving those East Coast vibes. I think it's kind of because I love dressing. I love clothes. I think clothes tell a lot about who you are. And so I like to dress. So I think they're probably noticing attire, probably.
Yeah, because LA is very much like flip-flops and whatever else they decide to wear from bed till grocery store to work, right?
Yeah, and my husband's originally from the East Coast, and when he did move here, that's exactly what happened. He was in flip-flops and shorts. I'm like, we cannot go to dinner in flip-flops and shorts. You must put
And maybe some shoes.
Yeah. Yes. But I had to get pants on him. It was baby steps. I think the first 6 months, he was just like, this has got to be it. But it was so funny because the whole concept of jeans and a sports coat, you couldn't get that down. There's something the East Coast, they don't do. They don't wear jeans to go anywhere, let alone with a sports coat out to dinner. And now, of course, he's got it down. But boy, it was a struggle for him. It was a struggle.
So what were your early days like living in Compton, California?
I have great memories growing up in Compton. I had my family was big. Even though I was the only child in my home, I had a big family. My mom's side of the family is huge. A lot of cousins, a lot of girl cousins, actually. All of my mother's sisters had girls, not a boy in sight from the girls. So, and we all spent a lot of our childhood together. So it was like I had a lot of sisters.
That's nice though, right? Having everyone close by.
To get a brother and sister. So I was okay with the cousin vibes. It was great. I had a lot of inmates. I have some great friends that are, my cousins now. So it's just really good. So that was that. And my dad actually was really the entrepreneur of the family. And you don't realize all of that until you get older, right? And so my dad was this entrepreneur. He actually was a DJ.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so my husband met me, and I knew all this music from all these genres. He couldn't believe how much music I had in my brain, right? And I was like, my dad was a DJ, and so he would get albums from everywhere. He knew every disc jockey. He knew every radio station. He would do all these parties and these big events. Like, my dad was like, he was the guy.
He must have been like a pioneer in the DJ space.
He totally was. It was something. And I remember when he had a business card, like you would think business cards only supposed to be for corporate people, right? And my dad had a business card. I was like, this card, this is crazy. I'm going to get a business card.
But as a DJ.
Of the entrepreneurialism for me, because I'm like, my dad has a business card, But my mom was very creative, so I had a very creative, environment. He was creative. My dad was always, they knew how to make something out of nothing. And I just had a great childhood. I really feel that my childhood was about able to express who I was and to be who I wanted to be, I started my first business when I was like in 6th grade.
Oh, what was that?
It was a little candy gig I had going on. My mom worked at one of those kind of thrift type stores. I don't know if you remember, like Big Lots, but it was called Pick and Save back then. You would know, this is a California thing. So
I'm totally lost. Yeah.
So it's these kind of stores that, like a discount type store. And my mom worked there, and so she wasn't a driver. So my dad and I would go pick her up on Fridays. She would ride with her friends during the week, and then my dad and I would pick her up on Fridays. So my dad would give me some money, and I would go straight to the candy aisle. And back then, you can get candy really cheap. So I would get a quarter, and I would get like 15 pieces of this kind of called spree candy, if you want to remember. It was like a Lifesavers, but it was this huge tube. It was like a long tube, about 15, 20 pieces probably in there. And so I would get $5 worth maybe. And I would get that candy, and then I would go home and, of course, wash my hands. For all of you, just making sure, I'm very clean. Wash my hands. And I would break up these candy pieces. Remember, I got this for 25 cents. Break the candy pieces up into 5. Right, so everybody would each have a color, because I was really about color coding things. So everybody had a red, a green, and all that.
And now we're getting into the fashion space.
So put all those pieces together, and I would write 25% on that bag, right? And then I would take it to school and sell it.
That's a great markup.
Right, it was totally. I understood inventory, I understood markup, I understood wholesaling and retailing. And so one day, my mom and dad didn't know I was doing it. And so one day, I was dumping all the quarters, because I was making a grip, all right? I was dumping all the quarters from my backpack onto my bed, and my mom goes like, where'd you get that money? And I was like, selling candy. Go like, what candy? So she said, I'm calling, tell your dad. So now I have 2 parents standing at my doorway going like, how did my child get a bed full of quarters? And so I just started breaking down my business plan. Again, I was 12, and breaking down my business plan, and my dad was like, wow,
let's ramp this up.
Well, let's take it to the next level. Unfortunately, kids don't keep businesses long. So it faded after my 6th grade, especially after I think once they got a hold of it, I was like, it's no more fun that I'm doing it, and they know.
It was no longer a secret.
It was my first business.
Wow.
Yeah, so that
entrepreneurial. And what was high school like? Where did you stay in Compton for high school?
I did not. I went to Linwood High School,
Okay.
and loved that and enjoyed. Again, not had a grad. I was a math girl, so very sciencey. So I knew my education would fall somewhere in the science space or somewhere in that. Not thinking entrepreneurial, not thinking business. Even though I was interested in it, I just loved math. So
What about music? Did you ever study an instrument? Because your father was so musical.
you have to have, if your dad's a DJ, you have to do something musical. So no, I sang and I had a little singing group. I was quite busy, my teenage years. So I had a little singing group. We would go sing around and all that stuff. So no, did that, had fun doing that. So, but nothing that you go like, oh, that's how it happened. I think what happened is my dad sparked the entrepreneurialism in me. I think I kind of flowed through college. I was good. I wish that my teachers were more engaged.
Oh yeah, that's across the board, isn't it?
Oh, I know. But even I'm thinking about even when I grew up, you had pretty much this young lady who was in trigonometry, right? Like in the 10th grade. And you didn't take advantage of this young lady or help this young lady that was in trigonometry in 10th grade. And so I just let it go. I was like, okay, this is good. Not really nothing. Nobody's interested in me doing math. And so I just kind of turned it into, I think, more thought processes, more being able to do thinking and processing. And so I think that's kind of what sparked the psychology piece eventually.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean you've kind of dedicated your professional life to helping people.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that's not like a small thing to decide to do. And it's because I'm way too selfish. Like I can't sitting around and I don't have the skills and obviously the education and all the qualifications, but just the idea of like day in and day out just trying to help people numbs my brain in some ways. But it's amazing. So like was it in university when you decided to like focus on psychology and psychiatry and therapy and
that came later actually. So I got my bachelor's in business administration. I still was helping people. So it was about helping people in the leadership space. So I was a mentor. And so I always found myself helping my staff advance up, helping people. So I was going down that path, but it was more in the mentorship kind of way.
Okay, that's nice.
I did. So my bachelor's was in business administration. My master's was in organizational management and leadership. So I was kind of going down that path of leadership is where it was headed, and mentorship. And then my first doctorate was my doctorate in business administration. And the dissertation was around mentorship. And actually that is what brought upon the work that I do, because in that research, I created the assessment, the operational style assessment, which you probably read about. So I created that during that time frame in my master's program and kind of finished it up in the doctoral level. And just kind of put it on the shelf at that point. As you do with a dissertation, you write it. And, chapter 5 says, well, what are you going to do with it? And you go, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I always said, man, it'd be cool for me to do something with it. I almost felt committed to doing something with it. And then I put it on the shelf, and I was a higher education administrator for years, 26 years in the higher education administration space. So being a dean of students, being an associate dean or a vice president. So I did that work in higher ed, from the community college level all the way to, private level to graduate schools. And then finally, I went to my husband and said, I really need to pull this research back out.
Wow, 25 years later.
Yeah. Now, right after I did my bachelor's in business, I would say probably another 6 years passed, and I got my doctorate in psychology, and then also got an honorary because of the work that I did. So it was an actual research project that I did with my psychology, where I used the assessment and I used that to help a business grow, to help the business that I was working in grow, using how do we communicate, helping the sales team communicate better, helping everyone connect better. And through that process is where I go, I guess I better take this and do something with it. And I went to my husband and said, you know what, I really would love to just kind of stop this educational space and pick back up my research and do some pilots. I have some funders who are interested in, I pitched a couple people. They're really interested in what I'm talking about. And it was different than because I don't see it as a personality test. I really see it as how you operate, how you show up in a room, versus the personalities are fluid and they can move. And so when I dug deeper and explained what I was doing, I got a lot of interest. And so from that interest, I said, I'm going to do it. And my husband says, I got you. take a year and make it happen. And it took 6 months. In 6 months, it was going. And we started just with like working with people individually in the leadership space. And just recently, we moved over into kind of the relationship space and started saying, okay, couples, what if you took this and understood this? You probably could be better in your space. You can communicate better. You actually might like each other more, or at least you'll know you don't.
It's interesting that that you've kind of decided to tackle like the two most difficult relationships probably we have in life, right? The relationship with our boss or our coworkers, and then the relationship we have at home with our husband or wife or significant other or partner. Like those are where all the conflicts and all the happiness and sadness starts and begins, right? Yeah.
I didn't consider it from that perspective, but you're right. It's the two largest relationships that you will have, besides with your children, right? And this still applies to that space too if you have children, but you're absolutely right. Either how you're going to deal with coworkers and your boss, or how you're going to deal. And they're not different. They're not that far off. It really isn't. You know, you hear people all the time say, I'm more at work than I am anywhere else in my, than I'm with my own family. It's like, it's true. So you have to understand how to communicate. We can't just fold our arms and go forget it. You have to figure it out. You have to be okay with conflict. You have to be okay with saying something that, and being who you are even, or feeling like I should say something and not saying it, but actually act on some things that might make you uncomfortable. And from that space, again, that's kind of where the research says you have to try different ways, but there is specific things that I can tell you about certain operational spaces. And if this person operates this way, then you can operate that way too, but know who you are as well. Like you don't have to change who you are, but adjustment is okay if we're in a different environment. I always say when you shift, they shift. If you shift the way your attitude is, somebody else could do the same, right? So if you can go into a store and be mean to somebody at a counter, then what would you expect back? You can't expect niceness back. However, it's amazing how some people do, right? But if you shift and come in a nice way and have a great and pleasant attitude and how you communicate, it's amazing how you'll get the same thing back. Very rarely, and the probability is very, very high that you'll get the positive back.
Sure. It's amazing like how common sense gets us through most of it. Like, just treat people like you want to be treated. If you bring a smile to a conversation, you'll probably get a smile back. Just basics, right?
To fall away from it,
Yeah.
And even we say that, but the commonalities are just not common. It's nothing common about it. It really is going to be an intentional effort of every single person.
I find it very interesting that you were entrepreneurial at the age of 12, and then you kind of institutionalized yourself for your multiple PhDs in education. And then all of a sudden you're like, one day you're like, no, I'm going to be entrepreneurial again. Yeah. Like not a lot of people, like, cause obviously you were working in higher education and you were in the institutions that you used to study in. Like you've been in that whole space. And then one day you're just like, no, I need to do my own thing. And not a lot of people can break out of that cycle.
Because I don't think that's what I was supposed to do. I knew I was going to be a teacher, but I clearly am a teacher of life. When, in an educational institution, you teach. So I started teaching through the leadership space, and then I wind up teaching, of course. So in my journey of the higher education space, of course, I taught. So I taught undergrad, I taught graduate school, I did all the dissertation teachings and all that stuff. So I enjoyed that. That was always the part I enjoyed. I always enjoyed the mentorship. I always enjoyed the teaching part of it, which is really what I do. When it says, what is your calling? My calling is teaching, right? Teaching people how to be better, how to want to be better, how to seek out better, And so that's really, I think, the calling part of it. So I think I've been teaching since 12, right? I've been teaching people how to buy candy and sell candy. I've been doing that teaching. I sold a flower business in the midst of all that too. I was 18, 17, I started 16, started my flower business, and just was making flower arrangements and doing stuff that people were like, oh, that's crazy. And then you wind up seeing them doing it now. But I was the one who took the pumpkins and cleaned out the pumpkins and then made flower arrangements in the pumpkins. I was doing that. I did that back like young. I was doing that. And so my dad had a friend said, and I was going to college and I was done doing the business. And he said, I think she'll buy it from you. I'm going to go buy it, right? I'm like, okay. And so she wound up buying my list back then. I'm dating myself, but my Rolodex.
Paper. Yeah.
So she bought my client list from me. And she bought, and I trained her staff on all of the different types of flower arrangements that I were doing. I was really busy during Thanksgiving because the pumpkin one was just a big seller for me. So I taught her and her staff how to do it, and she wrote me a check.
And there you go.
First, acquisition, transition, transaction.
How freeing was it for you moving from academia to being an entrepreneur again? Like, because you said at you were when you were part of the academic institutions, you were a teacher, and when you got out of them and started your own business, you're also teaching, right? So, what's it been like teaching without all the red tape and all the chaos of being part of an educational institution?
It's so cool though, is that I have a lot of higher education institutions that are my clients.
Oh, well, that's great.
So I get to, I've said this to a group of educators, and I can serve you better out here than I could in.
Yeah, you're way more free.
Yeah. And I was great in my space. And I can go back to every president that I worked for, and they'll be great. We'll have a great conversation, and they'll thank me for whatever. But I love the idea to be able to help my colleagues in the higher education space kind of just take a different approach of things because it is so institutionalized. So yeah, it was quite freeing. It was amazing. But the irony of being able now to work with them from the outside in, and to be able to relate and say, I understand what you're going through. I understand the budget. I understand the bureaucracy sometimes. I understand the political pieces of things sometimes. I get it.
And you're free of it.
Yeah.
And you just get to dip your toe back in from time to time.
Yeah, but from such a different perspective, right? Because the only thing they can control me on is their regulations of, you need your insurance, and I have all that. So I hand them everything they need, and I get to leave after my 4-hour training or my 1-hour training or my 2-hour training.
Amazing. So as you mentioned earlier, like you started doing like business and leadership and, dealing with these relationships in the professional space. And then just recently now you've moved into dealing with the personal space. Like what do you see as the main difference between working in these two spheres, the professional sphere and the personal sphere, and helping people manage how they feel, how they react to difficulties and conflicts, and how they work with the people around them? Because I feel like those are, again, we're dealing with the two key relationships that we have in our lives, but those are just very different in many ways. Yeah.
The one common denominator is are more in a more comfortable space.
In work or at home? Oh, for some people, maybe. Yeah.
Really, because you think about it, at work, you're trying to maneuver and figure out. Like, you don't just go blah right at work. You're going to try to do some kind of maneuvering or shifting so that you're not, being fully emotional at work, right? So you are being a little guarded. You are trying to manage a little bit better.
You can't let your full crazy out at work.
But at home, right, you are in a space where you feel more comfortable. You feel more free. Doesn't make it okay to do it at home. It's just that that's where you're in a more comfortable space, and you feel like this is my space. I could do what I want to do in it,
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, all don't feel that way. They feel just as restricted at home as they do at work. And that tells them something, right? We have to dig into what that represents, because if you're feeling that same that restriction in both places,
there's nowhere to hide.
Well, you have to ask yourself, what does that say about me? Not about the people. What is that saying about me? What do I need to understand about me that it's allowed, right? It's not, a lot of times we go, people are doing this to me. Not always.
Sometimes we do it to ourselves.
I would definitely say majority of the times.
Yeah.
It's usually us in the midst. And quickly I can say, oh my God, you did that to me. And I just said something, and it's like, but how I perceived is where the piece comes in, right? Is where the issue lies, is that my perception of it. And so then I have to ask myself, how am I operating to have that perception that I think he did something to me? when actually it's the way I feel because of his posture or because of his tone or because of all these things that I have in my mind of what it's supposed to be versus what the reality is.
My downfall would just be making off-color jokes at the office.
HR would be calling you in on a regular basis.
I would be so done. I would be so done. If I didn't work for myself, I'd be fired. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. HR would definitely be. You would have to have sensitivity training.
Luckily, I climb mountains for a living, so there's less sensitivity training. The workplace nowadays, I feel, is so hectic, actually, because like my brother works for a large financial institution, for example, and they've kind of come through COVID, and they were working from home, and and there's so much team development and relationship kind of development and mental health kind of things that you have to take care of for all the staff now. But I remember, like, I haven't really worked for other people so much in my life, and that's been good and bad. But like when I was going through university, I worked at a financial consulting firm off and on, and and the culture then 20 plus years ago is completely different now. And I think I always feel like if I can't make TV anymore, I can't do this kind of stuff. If I ever had to go back into an office, I wouldn't last a week.
Well, especially if the off-color jokes.
It's not the late 90s anymore. You can't do that.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And so part of that is generational, actually.
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely a generational shift. There's some research done in 2020 about who's in the workforce, right? And interestingly enough, I don't think realize it, but so there's 5 generations working right now.
Okay, walk me through this.
Yes, I will. So there is what we call the kind of silent generation or the traditionalists. So it's that generation. Then we have our boomer generation. Then we have the Xer generation. Then we have the millennials. And then we have the Zs. I think people don't realize that the Zs are working. Back in 2020, the youngest Z was like 27. So they were working. I mean, the oldest Z was 27. So they've been in our workforce for a minute, right? And now they're 27, they're up there in the workforce. And now that 2%, which is interesting, and going back to the traditionalists or the silent generation, 2% of them were working in 2020. 2% of them were.
Oh, really?
Figure out the age range of that group in 2020, the youngest was 78. So they're still running our country.
Which is awesome, isn't it? Terrifying.
I would say more terrifying. Just because of the gaps, right? So think about that's 2%. 2% when there's 60-something percent, the 100 is over here, right? And the larger part of the 100, like 78% of it is the Zs, the Xers, the millennials, and the Zs, right? So there's only like 6% somewhere in there in the boomers, maybe 18% is the boomers. So all the rest of it, think about that. Just looking at what that looks like. So what's happening is those that are still kind of at the top, there's not a lot of extras. There's extras at the top, but there's still more boomers at the top and traditionalists at the top. And so they're hiring millennials and Zs, and there's a huge disconnect because the extra generation was the first generation that said, you know what, I do want some form of work-life balance. And I'm going to push back a little bit. So the pushback kind of started in the X space, but that was the biggest entrepreneurial space too. I mean, a lot of extras went and said, I'm just going to go do my own thing and start my own business. So you had a lot of that. That's where the whole .com boom thing was happening. There was a lot of extras right in that space. Mm-hmm. And then what happened with the millennials, they just took it to the next level. It's like, no, not only am I not coming in to work at 9 o'clock exactly, I'm going to come in at around 9, and I'm going to leave at 5, period. You're not to contact me after hours. You pay me between this time and this time. And they hold still to that. And that's great because there's something that's teaching us around how. And so the shift of the workplace is those kinds of shifts where the pendulum switch was, the movement of the pendulum was real far right, coming from the millennials. The Xers just kind of start kicking it over, and they took it completely over. And the Zs are like, I'm on board 100%. I want a mental health day. I'm taking my time off. Every time I get a vacation, I'm going to use it. I'm not banking in any of it, right? And so that's now what the workforce has started to look like. And I think the boomers and not so much the extras, they're struggling a little bit, but the boomers and the traditionalists are really, really struggling because you're not doing what I told you to do, right? It's just not the way it is. It has to be collaborative. Hence why I'm in business. I'm helping those kind of collaborative conversations. We go in and do a whole corporate reset. Just like we can do a whole family reset. Like, we have to have these types of conversations, but we use tools that help people see it from a perspective where it's not, where no anger happens. The way we do it, it's so great because we come from their operational space. And if everybody agrees that this is how I operate and you can't make me be you and I can't make you be me, and we can figure out where the middle ground is, then we'll be okay.
How destructive has like digital technology been and communication technology been in the workplace, especially around like setting boundaries? Like I remember when I was a kid, my dad would come home at 5 or 7, depending if he had a late meeting or a dinner or whatever. But like he would never have to take a work call at home. He didn't, like, this was before mobile phones, right? No email, no computer. Like when he was off work, like he was off work. Maybe he would have to read something or in the evening or something, but he wasn't like on Zooms at 9 p.m. or 11 p.m. And I feel like as communication technology has been improved, and especially with COVID and all the craziness that happened there, like I feel like businesses now will maybe be more lenient about the hours you spend in the office, but then they will tack on more communication before 9 a.m. and after 6 p.m. And I feel like people are now more connected to their jobs because of like digital technology and communications. Whereas before, like you had to actually physically be in the office to be communicating with everyone. I feel like just that digital technology advancement, I think that causes a lot of miscommunication and frustration and anxiety in people.
For sure.
Yeah.
But again, I have to take it back to us individually.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the organization. Just because your boss sends you an email at 6 o'clock in the evening doesn't mean you have to reply. The point is this belief that you have to reply. That's where it happens. And that's us. That's us saying, oh my God, he emailed me, I got to reply. No, you don't, actually. So all of that anxiety is self-induced anxiety because we believe we have to or we're going to get fired. The millennials and the Zs, like, I'm not doing it. So it's now the Xer and the Boomer are still in that space because that's how they were brought up. And understanding that you don't have to. I mean, that's the whole point, that just because he sent it doesn't mean it has to happen. And if they do reach you outside and say it's an emergency, then you have to have a conversation about your boundaries and your space at home. And they have to listen because it is no longer something that people can now do. But we have to manage it. I mean, we definitely have to manage it. We have to be able to say, I work from this time frame and this time frame, or I will be available. Or if they ask, is it possible you can be available? And you say yes, now you've committed to being available, right? So then you have to be available. But if you say, no, I'm not able to be, then you're not able to be. And I think that dialogue needs to happen from those who create that environment of believing that I have to respond because they're emailing me at 6 a.m. You don't have to respond at 6 a.m. When I'm communicating to my staff, if I'm at the office later than 5 o'clock, I usually address my email as the next day, or I use technology to send my email the next day. I'm very sensitive about that because I don't want to create any stress, but I don't want you to even create your own at the same time. So I'm very intentional about that, and I think all leaders need to be intentional about that. I think all of us need to just be more intentional about how we want people to feel on the other end.
What do you see as kind of the main friction points in office relationships and in the work environment these days, like from your perspective?
It's communication. I think that's the biggest thing. If I'm sitting here just quiet, all of a sudden you think I don't like you.
Right.
When I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
Right? I'm just a person who I'm conceptual in thought. I like to process things, so I need to process things, right? And so I'm processing. Just because I'm not talking doesn't mean that I don't like you or I don't want to talk to you. I just happen to be processing at the time. And allow that to happen, right? I think we create a lot of it, as I always say. I think we have our perception of what you're supposed to be. And when you're not being that, then there's a problem.
Yeah, because like I don't work in a traditional work environment. So when I see things like online about coaching or about, like you see a lot of things like you don't work for your company, you work for your boss, like, or you work for your colleagues, like, like a team, right? Like, and if your boss is good, you'll stay at the company. If your boss is terrible, you'll move on. Doesn't even matter what company it is. Like, it could be a very prestigious company or it could be a startup. But those key relationships usually depend on whether you stay or whether you stay happily or not, right? And I always find that very interesting. Do you work a lot with bosses about how to manage their staff? Yeah.
I wind up working more. I coach more of the executive level, so I coach the CEOs, the C-suites usually, and then director level is usually where I coach. And yeah, we talk about those very things. Definitely talk about how we are communicating or what our perceptions are. What do we give out? Because it is important. We do have to manage how we deliver the message because people are looking to you as the boss. I agree. We've heard that all. I've heard that saying that people leave bad culture and bad bosses, right? That's why people leave organizations. And it's just simply because it's the way we communicate. It's a perception of what we expect you to be. Like, we all walk in the room. I'm expecting you to be who I am, and you're expecting to be who I am. And that way we can talk better. If you think like me and I think like you, we'll have a great conversation. But that's not the case always. And so you have to be able to say, oh, okay, they don't think like me or they don't process like me. And so I need to be able to adjust so that we can have a good conversation. And it's just that. And that's with no judgment. I think that's also the big issue, too. There's a lot of judgment happening and a lot of miscommunication and no listening.
No listening at any level.
And there's levels to listening. There's definitely those levels of where you're hearing people versus you're just interrupting people, right? Those are different levels of the listening. And to be at the highest level, which is empathetic, which is that not only I'm listening to you, but I'm also understanding you from your operational style. Like, I'm understanding how you operate and why you would say what you say. So then that I don't have to disagree with it. I just have to go, oh, that's coming from your perspective. That makes sense. And I can then say, I don't perceive it that way, but that's great information because it's something I never thought of because you're thinking of it in a different way.
And what do you think? I mean, beyond communication, what are other kind of friction points that might exist in a work environment?
Well, it's always going to be culture, right? We all come from different cultures, and it's generation. I always go operation first, so how you operate first. Secondly is how is your generation, and thirdly is going to be culture. And so if you come from a culture that doesn't like certain races, then that's what's going to be in your workforce, right? Is how you're going to operate from that space. Or if you don't like women, or if you don't like men, or whatever, right? If that is a part of your culture, if that is a part of your upbringing, and you decide that you're going to carry that into your workspace, then that's what it's going to be.
That sounds like a toxic first step.
Yeah, but that's how, that's why I go operation first, generation second, and culture third. So your culture, you have to really decide what parts of my culture are not healthy, right? What parts of my culture that I don't want to continue to deliver or put out there or exude in some ways. Like, there's things in our cultures that we do have to go, I'm good. I think about generationally, same concept. There's certain things in generations that we go like, I'm not doing that anymore, right? Corporal punishment was one of those, right? The Xers the boomers were still spanking. The Xers cut it a lot.
I got spanked.
Yeah. But the Xer generation was like, I'm not doing that no more, right? They're the ones who started the whole timeout thing because they thought this is not working, right? And so they shut it all down. Now, of course, if you ask the boomers, like, here are the rods for the child, right? But the Xers decided that that's not. We're going to do some timeout. We're going to have some conversations. We're going to do this kind of stuff. And you'll hear a boomer or even a traditionalist like, they need spankings, But they decided that that's not a part of the generation they want to carry forward. And so I think that's the same with our culture. There's things that we just should decide. Do we want to carry this forward? Is this for the betterment of all of us? And not carry that forward, right? And only carry the things forward that can actually progress us in a positive way where it can affect all of us in a positive way. And that happens, unfortunately, in the workforce. It does exist. I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to. And if it is there, when it is there, it's the subtle one, which is, I think, even more dangerous. So, but it does still exist. But it's going to come with every time all of us have to make a decision that we're no longer going to bring these things forward. That's not for the betterment of all of it.
That's a tough decision to make.
It is. Yeah. But it has to be individual. It's not a group thing. I wish it was a group think thing, but I really think it's one person at a time has to just decide, I'm not going to do that anymore.
And the cultural difference. So let's take a really stereotypical example of having a 60-year-old white male as a CEO of a company. Like how much miscommunication and different levels of culture and different operational styles would exist between a 60-year-old white male who's a CEO and, his Gen Z staff who are in their 30s. Like those are different worlds of the way they grew up, the way they were educated, and the way that they want to work. And that just seems like a recipe for disaster.
It's individualized though. So I would I would meet with that CEO, right? And if that CEO has decided all the generational stuff that would normally be a part of how he would lead is not there, like there's no top-down stuff and there's no, women can't do this or whatever, right? If that's not there in him and he's decided that I'm shifting away from that and I'm going to focus on embracing these other generations and learning from them, having a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset, then it's going to be great. So I can't, that's it, to be able to go like, white male 60, it's all bad. It's not. There's some great people and spaces that are that age and that race that are doing great work. It's just, again, individualized. Like, how does that individual decide? What did that individual bring forward? Or what did that individual learn from? And how did that individual want to shift to be able to communicate to a different generation and grow his company? Because if he stays in the space he's going to, in the way you're suggesting, he's not going to grow his company.
And those people aren't going to want to work hard.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it really is individualized. That's what goes back to, like, I think each one of us individually have to really decide that we're going to be more intentional about how we interact with each other, that we're going to be more intentional about how you operate versus how I operate, that I understand your needs and values, you understand mine, and that we're going to have different conversations. And that will stop the kinds of things that stifle, I think, families, relationships, and organizations.
How important do you think is it for people to go through like some sports when they're young, like and working within a team? Because I always find I played sports my whole life and I played team sports, and it was always hard working and having everyone on the same page and making sure everyone liked everyone else, and if there was friction, talking about it, getting the guys I was playing basketball with to like work through their problems instead of just being angry at each other all the time. Like I feel like I got such an interesting lesson in that through my early sporting career, and I feel like it's always allowed me to kind of manage the relationships around me in a fairly positive way. And a lot of people don't get that, and they grow up like really isolated or playing or doing individual sports, which is a totally different mentality. And then when they get into the workplace, they're just like me, and that can be a real challenge.
Yeah. And so I have this saying that life is not a sport you want to participate in without a coach.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So coaching is not just for teams in the sense of the athletic space, right? I ran track, so I had a coach too. But coaching, I think coaching in the sports are great because it definitely is exactly what I think organizations need, right? Not all coaches, some coaches yell, but no yelling kind of coach. But,
my coach yelled.
Yeah, but in a way that, that good way of supporting team and understanding that we have to work together and not separate, and that's necessary in every single organization. But I do believe, this is just me, and there's definitely enough research to back it up, is that people need a coach. Everyone needs, especially in your professional career, every Fortune 500 person at the top have coaches.
Mentors or coaches?
Mentors are ones that I can catch you when I catch you, right? Coaches is that I'm locked you in, I paid for you, and you're going to show up for me every time I need you to show up for me. And that's
a very different relationship.
Very, very different relationship. And they build. I mean, the great part is that relationship cultivates throughout the years. But I just believe everyone needs a coach, whether you're trying to advance your career, whether you're trying to better your relationships, I think everyone needs that strategy partner that can help you in a way that's not biased, right? Our partner is going to be biased, right? Some partners say, I'll tell you the truth. Like, yeah, but this is going to tell me from a different perspective, right? And so I just believe especially if you're in a leadership role, you need a coach.
How hard is it to find like the right coach? Like, let's say I was a business executive and my whole company was falling apart and everyone hated me and I hated everyone. And I was like, okay, I need someone to help me, figure out what I'm doing wrong and figure out what they're doing wrong. But then you go onto the internet or you talk to some friends. I feel like there's like too many coaches. Like there's, and especially since COVID, I feel like, the amount of people I've had since I started this podcast, the amount of emails I get every day being like, do you need a podcast coach? We can teach you how to get more viewers and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, no, just leave me alone. Want to do my own thing. But I just feel like, it's hard to be a coach if you haven't been bankrupt, haven't been divorced, haven't had a company fall apart on you, because then you don't have those experiences of failure. Like, and it's funny because you've had an incredible educational career. You're really well educated, and then you've been in this space for a really long time. So I would feel quite comfortable working with someone like yourself. But then there's people who are like 30 who are like, I can be your coach, and I'm like, but you haven't had your life destroyed, and I feel like you haven't made enough mistakes to really learn from. Yeah.
So that's a great question. I definitely, because there's these coaching certificates. Right.
Right.
And I, none of my coaches have them. I don't think, I look at education and theory and research, right? To me, that matters way more than a certificate that says I can coach you through this kind of model or this kind of model, right? And so I think it's important for people to do their research. I do believe, I agree with you 100% in that you want somebody who understands human behavior. You want somebody who's been through some stuff, right? I look at all of our executive coaches, for example, they all have terminal degrees. Terminal means that they have a doctorate of some kind, right? So whether it's through education, whether it's psychology, business, they have that terminal degree. And the common denominator of that is research. That's one. Second common denominator is that they have to understand human subjects, because to do their research, they have to get approval to do research with the human subject. Right? That means I have to get approval to have a conversation with you, be able to ask the right questions and be able to get the right answers. So I have to understand you, right? I have to understand people. So that's first. Then they also have to have a career. You have to say, if I'm hiring terminal degree people, they've been around, right? They just didn't get this and they're not, 30 years old. These are individuals who have been in the career, who've been in CEO spaces, in the C-suite space, director space. They've done the work, right? So I focus on that in our coaches and our executive coaches. So that's my company. And I would say I'm probably the only one that does that, right? And so I'm very intentional about that. Second one is our business coaches must have master's degree. They must have an MBA, they must have MP, and they must have entrepreneurial spirit. You must have started a business and crashed. You absolutely, or you must have started one and is doing quite well. So you have to have that skill, and it comes with it, right? But then you also, because you have your master's degree, you understand the theory of business. Because where small businesses struggle is they don't understand the theory of business. They understand that it is there to make money. It is not there because it's something you love to do, and you're just going to do something you love to do. That's a donation, right? That's a different kind of system. If you start a business, the goal is to make money. And so you have to understand how to make money, right? And so we look at it from that perspective. We have counselors too, so we have organizational counselors. We have this division where when the EAP program, which is kind of a counseling program that businesses have, when that fails the organization and they really need somebody to come in and do some stress relief training or do some grief training, then we come in and do that work. They all have to have master's degrees, as well as some can be licensed, some don't have to be licensed, but you have to have, again, the theory of understanding human beings. And so I think that's the key, in order for somebody to coach, yes, they have to have the experience, but they have to understand the theory around this, because there are models and theories around how humans operate. And at the end of the day, that's who we're coaching.
Yeah. And it's nice too if you can find a coach that has like a different skill set than you. I mean, if if you were an executive at a company or something like that, and you were a certain type, you would definitely want to, if you're a yin, you want to find your yang, right? So that you're not both stepping on each other's toes, and you're not both walking into the same situation with the same mentality, right? I guess you would want a coach that helps you see something from a different angle, or else you just have positive reaffirmation of your own ideas, and that doesn't help. Yeah.
Sure. And like the operational style, so it's the assessment that I created. We actually match. Our matching is probably we're 96% accurate on our matching with coaches and clients, right? It's always that, there's always a little percentage where I'm like, okay, we got to do a little shift here. It's 4%, But pretty much every time we match a client with a coach, it lasts for a long time because I'm matching them for that very reason. I'm matching them that they understand each other. So then that entry point is going to be easy. I'm not going to have you, again, doing a yang thing with somebody who's a yin up front because you're going to like, no way, right? But then they are taught through my training is that now I need you to hit the yin and the yang piece. So once they build a relationship, then they build the relationship to say, I think you need to revisit that. I think that may not be the right move. Here's some data to prove that. Here's some stuff that you can look at. There's some articles you might want to read, but I think this may not be the move, right? And they would then go, think about that. I'm going to take a look at that before I go make that move. And that's because they built that relationship. So the yin and the yang part, I think, comes after the fact. We have to first match so then that it's an easy, relatable connection, right? That I get you, you get me, and totally makes sense why you're my coach. Kind of thing.
I think like every company and every executive should have not just, and maybe not like a coach, but with the same skills that you would bring to an institution. Like everyone should have like a chief of staff, and that's like a coach, right? Like that's the person that you spend the most time with. That's the person you bounce ideas off of. They help you manage everything, and then when things aren't going right, that's the person you talk to, right? And if those like chief of staff, like we're taking this term from the government, I guess, and implementing into the private sector or the educational sector, but it just seems like everyone needs someone like that, like a sounding board, basically. Yeah.
And I really wish that was the way it was used. Unfortunately, every position, when I come into an organization, every position is overworked.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So then that chief of staff doesn't have as much time to do that kind of work. It would be great. And I think that's where it starts out. But then they wind up doing so many other special projects. So they're doing this and they're doing that. And so that time away, the time that they spend doing all this other stuff, they just miss it. And I find that a lot, but that is ideal. That would be an ideal situation. I think that's why I'm in business, because that ideal situation is not working.
Yeah, it's amazing like how many people don't give themselves time to actually think. And like they just kind of run. They're running all the time, and they don't have anyone to actually like stop and do the heavy thinking with, right? And I think that's a big issue.
Well, we call ourselves strategy partners. I mean, that's what we found. That's why I started doing the work when I did the pilots. That's exactly what came out of it from the executive level, from the mid-management level. They just felt like they needed somebody else to talk to outside of work because they wanted to get different perspective, because inside of work, it was always going to be the same perspective. We found that at the director level, kind of the same concept. They just wanted a sounding board, right? Like their own chief of staff, kind of with their executive coach, to be able to do that sounding board work. And so each level needed it for different reasons, but they didn't have it available.
Mm-hmm. So you've, again, this is great. So you've set up this
relationships.
We're getting into it. So this is where we make this transition. Working in institutions for more than 2 decades, and then going into executive level coaching and stuff like that, and building up a successful business there. And congratulations. And I'm sure no small task building your own business. But then, what would make you want to enter the field of personal relationships and home life? Because if you've got a good business doing corporate stuff, right, why would you want to dip your toes into that mess?
Because I think the operation, I created the research, it really is the same. I can use it for human resources as purposes. The great part is that it's just it's a people communicator piece.
It doesn't matter where the relationship is happening.
Right. Yeah. And in so many different ways. And so being approached with the idea of let's see what it looks like over here. I would tease all the time when I was doing my trainings. I was doing my corporate trainings. I'm like, don't mention my name in your house with your spouse. Don't go telling them what, the operational says about them. I don't want to, I don't want to get involved in your personal life. And I would always tease about that. But I think I got asked enough that once you just try with couples, what happens if you try it with couples? Let's do it fun. Let's not make it serious kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, we could do it in a more jovial way and have some conversations. It does make you laugh when you get the aha moments around it. You go like, oh my God, that is so me, and it gives you the introspection. And maybe I could ease up in that space because that is what I do. So it gives aha moments for everybody in the room. And then when the spouses go like, see, I've been telling you.
You've been an asshole for a long time. See, my coach agrees. Yeah.
Well, not right. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But yes, it does just kind of help. It makes some laughter happen. You want to add some food around that so we still keep the kind of community piece going. And it's just something to make people go, wow, and what happens is so far, when people walk away, they go like, it was very, very helpful. It was helpful. And I think we will try to apply this and use this, Yeah, the one and dones are always something I tell corporations, even individuals, same that, this kind of work is not a one and done. Therapy is not one and done. You don't go to one therapy session and you go like, okay, I'm fixed. It's just not that way. You really have to, just like coaching, you have to put the effort into this work if you want to build or be better or understand or have a better way of communicating. We all have to practice it. It's a practice. It's like when you go in your team and you're playing sports, you have to practice the plays. If you don't practice the plays, you're going to miss your cue, right? You're going to miss your station. When they're manning and you doing something other than man, you're off, you're lost. When they're trying to throw you the ball and you got your back turned, right? Because you didn't know the play. So you have to practice the plays. You have to practice the strategies, the plays, and then go, I'm going to apply this in my life. I'm going to use this so I can be a better person, so I can be able to better communicate with my spouse, especially if you feel like you have some turmoil.
It's interesting because I feel like in the business sphere, everyone's like trying to be professional, I think, and then also, maybe they're feeling hurt or not listened to or something like that, or the culture doesn't fit, or the operations, as you've explained. But at home, I feel like everyone's just that professionalism is kind of out the window, and then everyone kind of lets everyone know who they really are, and that can be destructive.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole point. It's like, yes, you can be freer in home, but in the same sense, you still have to understand that you're connected with another human being who has emotion, who has feelings too. So you can't blurt out and then expect them to go, "Oh, I understand," right? Energy can match energy very quickly, right? And sometimes energy comes and the other turns it off, right, and backs away. So then you have this avoidance that takes place. So it has to figure out where the even space is that we both are going to decide that we're going to communicate in a way that's even, right? Where I'm not going to be up and you down, or vice versa. Like, we're going to really be able to communicate in a way where we're both going to be effective. Nobody needs to be right. It's really about effectiveness, because we can just agree that we don't see eye to eye on the subject matter, and we have to both be okay with that, right? Or we have to figure out where if we have to move forward on the subject, one of us is going to have to go, you know what? I don't have enough data, but I'll go with this because it seems to be something I can support. And we have to do that from time to time in our lives. It's just a part of a relationship. You will have to do that.
Compromise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if you don't, then you're not going to be in a relationship.
It's very isolating, right?
Yeah. You just know you're not going to be in a relationship long. I mean, because especially now, I think, again, in the younger generations too, that they're telling each other about each other very quickly. I have a 30-year-old daughter, and she does not play around.
Oh, okay.
She knows my research too, so she is very clear about who she is and what she can bring to the table, and she likes the communication part now. She understands that we need to talk. We have to have a conversation, And I definitely don't recommend anybody saying to each other, we need to talk, because that is definitely a killer when it comes to relationships. It's like, it's more about, again, it's how people operate, right? And I keep saying that, but you would have to understand the operational styles to really understand what I mean. But Like there's 4 different types. I look at it from that perspective. Either you have someone who is very, what I would call relatable, right? So it's a person that really needs things to relate. They have to relate. They're compassionate in the way they communicate, right? So you have that kind of person. Then you have the person who is what I would call structural, and they like order, like structured things put in a certain way, right? But then they communicate from a very comprehensive way. So they might repeat themselves because they really want to make sure it's clear, right? Then you have someone that is more structural, more, I would say, systematic. And they communicate from a conceptual place, very data-driven type person, right? And then you have someone that would be considered actionable, right? And they communicate from a very courageous space. I can just say what's on their mind and keep it rolling, right? And so if you just had those 4 types of people, and you're one on this spectrum, and you're on, and the other, your relationship, your personal relationship is what's on this side of the spectrum, there's going to be some communication that just has to happen because you think, operate differently, and communicate and process things differently. And so if you don't communicate, and this one over here thinks that they're right all the time, and this one over here thinks they're right all the time,
got problems.
it's just going to have problems, right? And so it's about, so what do you want to do? You want to just have problems, or you want to decide that means grudges have to go, tempers have to go, the whole concept of, standing your ground in a situation has to go. Because relationships about that, what you say, compromise, but it's about effective communication.
It just seems so much more loaded and much more explosive when you're dealing with personal family relationships. Like let's say, again, we take a very traditional, stereotypical kind of husband, wife, 2 kids, 2 dogs, right? Like, walking into that as a coach has to be way more dangerous. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious. Like, has to be way more dangerous than working with executives.
I would start with, I have to understand how they operate. I just gave you those 4, right? I need to know where everybody falls in that category first. Once I understand where everybody falls, then I know what everybody's expecting and what everybody needs, right? And what their values are. So once I understand that, then I'm going to be able to say, well, this is what this person needs. Is everybody willing to give that person their needs? And are you willing to help them meet their needs and values? And vice versa, all down the line. So those 4, however however the makeup is, you have to understand that. And I think, to me, would be easy in the sense of that I can at least be able to clearly understand everybody in the room. And then I would then ask everybody else to understand everybody in the room, right? Emotion definitely is going to be heavier in a home than it would be at work, right? In the sense of, like you said, explosive, or people are going to speak out in a home space. And that's okay, but you also have to understand, who are you talking to, right? Who are you connecting with? Because if you explode with this particular type of person, that's not going to work out, right? And, well, I just need to get my out. Then, okay, go in a room by yourself and do it. Get it out. It doesn't help because you're doing it for you, not for the person.
So direct it to the right place.
Right. Which is in a room somewhere where you can process it out for yourself, because it's not going to connect with that person, because it all depends. That person's like, I don't know what's going on.
They need a closet with it's totally padded. And
we all have to process our emotions. What I call regulation, emotional intelligence calls it regulation, right? And it's about being understanding about how do you regulate the emotion. It doesn't say suppress it. Suppress it gives you ulcers, and cancer. Not saying suppress your emotions, but you have to understand where to regulate them, meaning that there's a time and place that I'm going to be more effective. I want to be able to use my emotion in a more effective way than to use my emotion in a destructive way. But that's a choice.
And when you go into a relationship with a husband and a wife, for example, are you also dealing with the whole family? Like if there's children involved as well? Because I feel like, and I don't have kids, but I mean, for people who have kids, a lot of the challenges between a husband and a wife can be child related. Like, we have no time for ourselves. The kids are playing sports. Like, we're constantly driving them to practices. I'm just speaking out loud from my own parents when I was a kid, right? Like how challenging it was to just be running all the time and not having any time, for themselves or something like that. Like, I mean, are you also working with like the whole family and the children as well?
No, we can, but we don't. We focus on relationships, just the relationship between a male and a female, or a person, 2 people. It doesn't have to be male and female, just 2 people. two people relationships. We were focusing in on that space.
Okay.
Two people that decide they're going to be together and they're going to live in the same house and they're going to have a relationship or they're going to have a marriage or whatever. We're focusing.
Sounds terrifying.
But it's all a willing participant. You have to be a willing participant, and you have to be okay where, and saying, it's my bad. You have to be able to, again, the more we can be, and people use the word vulnerable. That's a great word.
Accountable.
Accountable is another great word. I think I say owning you, just owning all of it. Like, own if you are not being nice. Own if you are being nice. Own if you're, you don't want to talk to nobody. Own it. Just own all of your stuff and don't project it onto somebody else, right? That's the start. And then if we just all are okay, we'll walk in the room and say, I'm going to own it. Everything that I'm bringing here, what's in the closet, what's not in the closet, all the bones, all the skeletons, I'm owning it all. And I'm going to be okay with looking at me today. So I ask that when everyone walk in the room, I need you to be okay with looking at you today. Not the person across from you, not the person that came with you. I want you to look in you today. We're going to have a lot of conversation about you and what you decide, how you are going to be different or how you're going to decide to shift for the betterment of your relationship. And that's just how we start. So you have to be able to commit to the fact that, no, I'm down. I'm down to hear what's happening and where I could shift or how he heard it, right? Or how my partner heard it versus how I said it. Those things matter just because it's not how I meant it, but that's how it was heard. And you have to be okay with how it was heard. You can't convince them, that's where arguments start. I want to convince you that you didn't hear it that way, which they call gaslighting these days, right?
Right, yep.
But you're trying to get me to, don't convince, if someone says, I heard it this way, you have to be like, okay, that's how you heard it. I can't change how you heard it, but let me share how I meant it.
Or we just rewind it on the webcam, right? Everything's live now, right?
It is possible. But yeah, it's like, remember that was the commercial with the red flag, right? But
there's actually, sorry to interrupt you. There's actually a television show called Black Mirror, and they had an episode where everyone had these contact lenses where they could rewind what just happened, and they could be watching it while still having a conversation with someone else. And then, I think there was this man and this woman, and like he said something, and then but he got flush and maybe like swallowed a little, and she was like, oh my God, he's cheating on me, because she had to like rewind it several times in her mind to like figure it out. And then there was a relationship between these other people, but it was secret. But then she was like rewinding like how they were looking at each other during dinner. I was like, that's a terrifying technology.
Yeah. It'll get people to own their stuff really quickly. I'll tell you that. It'll definitely make people
beyond just communication when it comes to relationships and stuff like that, personal relationships, private relationships. Beyond communication, what else do you see are some of the major issues that cause conflict?
I think it goes back to, again, the same thing. The same thing in the professional space. It's going to be generation and culture, right? How we were all brought up. We were all raised differently. And if you're going to coexist in a home with another person or coexist in a relationship, you both didn't come from the same household. You didn't come from the same parent structure. You didn't come from the same support mechanisms. All that's different. And you have to know that when you bring that in, if you hadn't unpacked it and understood what happened in your childhood or in your relationships prior, you can bring it right on into another one. So you have to be willing to know, this is what I did in the past, and I have to understand how this can play into what I have.
Yeah. And how dangerous is it to think like, I'm perfect and I've never made any mistakes?
It's very real. There's people who believe that extremely, because that tells me what I think about theory. There's growth of fixed mindset theory, right? So the fixed mindset theory basically says that this is the way I am and I can't be any different, right? Or growth says that, yeah, this is the way I am, but if I learn a little bit and I read a little bit and I do some more stuff, I can be better. And so what you just described is a very fixed mindset, right? So somebody's like, this is it. I'm who I am and take it or leave it. And I would recommend anybody to leave it.
Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of people think like that these days. They're just like, I'm too old to change, or I'm too stuck in my ways. This is
A fixed mindset.
Yeah.
You can now call them.
Just walk around, fixed mindset. Yeah.
Okay, no, okay, don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't point your finger at anyone and say fixed mindset, man or woman.
Totally do that. No, she did. But yeah, that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. When you hear that, when they go, we always used to do it that way. You're like,
I feel like in today's world, okay, like let's go back. Like, so my parents' generation, right?
Yeah.
You know, they met each other in the 70s, you know, and it was, you know, they kind of grew up in semi-similar circumstances, you know, kind of a little bit religious, but not too much. Both Caucasian, you know, Canada was a lot less multicultural back then than it is today, which today it's very multicultural. So I'm just wondering, like, you know, fast forward to 2024, like you've got, you know, it's a great thing. We live in a global world. There's people living in the United States and Canada, for example, from all over the world, different religions, different backgrounds, different this, different that. And these people are all coming together to have relationships. I mean, in a lot of ways. And then it's like, oh, how much time do you spend on the internet? How much time do the kids spend on the internet? What kind of TV shows do we watch? Are we going to raise the children religious or not? Like, I just feel like now is the most insane time to try to raise a family.
just a lot of conversations that have to happen. I mean, humans need to know we have to talk. We have to communicate. We have to have high levels and effective communication. You just have to in raising a family, in having a relationship. And when you don't have conversation, I love when I see on social media and there's couples that go like, we have business meetings. Like, I love that idea. Family meetings, those are so important. Like, you have to kind of even, as I talk about how work and stuff kind of crosses over, like, there's some good stuff that you could bring into the home and go like, hey, let's have a business meeting. Let's have a family meeting. Let's talk about these subject matters. Here's the topic of this discussion. Let's have dinner again and have dinner together. And let's have these discussions. And even set some boundaries around the discussion so you can be effective, you know?
It's like a board meeting. Who's going to take the minutes?
No, right. No, I mean, it sounds funny, but it can be quite effective for some families, you know? But you have to figure out the outlet to have effective communication happening. And I think some in a way where maybe we're just having game night and we're going to have a discussion before game night or whatever you want to do. But obviously you have to figure out how to have effective communication around things because toxic stress is very real in children and it's very real in adults. And it's because of experiences that you don't know that's happening or experiences that you're having that you're not relating to your family. And so you have to understand that that is all very, very real. And that's why therapy is important. You know, you don't have a coach, definitely get a therapist, one of the two. You need somebody to process some of the emotions that are happening. You know, I think it's important because we can bottle those things up and suppress. And we don't want our children to do that. We don't want them to suppress their emotions, especially if something is happening at school and you don't know about it. Or you don't want your spouse to be suppressing something that their boss did didn't tell you, or something your spouse did to you and they didn't tell you. So it's so important to be able to have discussions, effective communication. So not just talking at each other. You really have to be willing to listen and hear what they say and not interrupt and allow them to share and get it out. And sometimes you feel like your spouse is long-winded. You could time it. You could say, I need you to give this to me in 5 minutes, you know, or I can give it to you. And we do something that, again, that's where you kind of add some jovialness to it and some comedy. So you could make light.
I feel like so you've been teaching and you've been coaching for many decades. So you've got a long experience. I feel like 30 years ago, for example, people kind of worked in the same job for a long time, sometimes their entire careers. They didn't really think about growth or change or development in the same way we do today, right? So, you know, fast forward now to 2024, everything is online. You know, people are changing their entire ideas of who they are or their perspectives of who they are, what they want, what they are going to be, what they're going to build. People are changing these every 2 or 3 years. They're sometimes completely revolutionizing themselves. And I just feel like in a personal relationship, if those two people aren't both committed to that kind of growth or that kind of change, and that cycle of change, it can be incredibly destructive and difficult, right? But again, I feel like this is a problem maybe people didn't have 30 or 40 years ago where the technology just wasn't there for people to really educate themselves. Like, for example, I was like, I'm going to set up a podcast. And then I went into YouTube and I figured out how to set up a podcast studio, right? Like I did it in a day, right? But 30, 40 years ago, that knowledge wasn't at all possible. You would have to hire someone, had to consult. Like I don't even know how to do it, but you can do things now so much faster. And I feel like that can cause so much friction in a partnership when people are completely revolutionizing themselves every 3 to 5 years instead of maybe 20, 30 years ago, it was every decade or so. I feel like this cycle of change is increasing every year as we kind of have the technology to go with it. And oh my God, like AI will change everything in a very good or bad way, who knows? But how do you feel like that is stressing couples and relationships out?
I think it's individualized, right? Because that technology definitely plays a part, but people use it for different reasons, right? But if you just go with the scenario you're speaking of, is and that person is that way and their spouse is not that way, then absolutely there's gonna probably be some disconnected communication. You have to figure out there's some disconnect operationally, because you just, in my mind, you just described this kind of actionable, right, person that we just talked about when I talked about the 4. You just described a very actionable person who courageous about moving and making things happen. And if the spouse is the comprehensive person who needs a plan and needs an order and very structured, right, you can have some disconnect. So I think it's about individuals deciding if you have to learn early. Opposites attract, but do they stay? Right? Do they make the glue? Does it stick? Right. So yes, opposites would attract because, ooh, I like the courageousness of this person, and ooh, I like the structure of this person. But if you go, oh, this person's going to make me be structured, this person's like, no, I'm not. Yeah. So you have, again, going back to what we say, have to have effective communications about that, but you have to be aware that that's happening immediately. Like you have to be aware of it. Like you have to go like, wow, we're totally different. What is that going to look like 6 months from now? Right? Are you going to still be in this gaming console situation and I'm going to be over here being a banker? Like, how is this going to work out? And so if you don't realize that up front, I think that helps. And I think going back to the past, yes, technology was less, but there were roles. There was this weird situation that there was roles. A woman's supposed to be here, a man's supposed to be here. It was roles that were like solidly locked. And people wouldn't even pass the role. 40 years ago, it was roles. And your role is this, and your role is this. And there's all these roles where it's like, there's no roles anymore, right? So I even think not so much technology, but the roles are gone. And so now everybody cooks in the house. Everybody cleans in the house. There's no role for anybody. And so I think, again, it has to be about how we're going to engage in effective communication. How are we going to decide that? Because love is only going to get you so far.
It doesn't get you that far.
It's going to get you to the point where you're like, oh, I love you, I like you, but then
yeah, then you have to find a functional workspace.
Yeah, or find a functional situation where you all can coexist. Because if not, it's not going to work out.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you've kind of developed these kind of 4 main personality types. Have you gone into depth on like which of the personality types match the best with the other? Like, because obviously you just said like, the circumspect person and the actionable person, like that might lead to a lot of attraction in the early stage, but then as a working relationship it might be disastrous. Like have you kind of identified like this is you're this kind of person, this is the kind of person you should try to find?
First let me address that. Personalities are fluid, operationals are not. So how you operate is how you were born. That's how you show up. That's how you're going to be. You can't change that, right? And so that was my research because I didn't want to do another personality assessment. There's enough of those out there, right? And those all change with your environment and all that stuff. Operation doesn't change. Your primary operational style is who you are. So when we look at it from that perspective, can I say this would do better with this and this would do better with this? Yes, I can. But then I have to also add there's the culture piece, the generation piece involved, right? But yes, I can give you a good general idea. Like, I mean, I've definitely done it where this couple came to me, he took the assessment, she took the assessment. I'm like, oh my God, you guys are going to do great because you both connect in the same ways that need to be connected for you to be in a long relationship. And then these are the areas where you will have conflict, but you will do okay because these are very strong together, right? And so some of it's pretty obvious and you can see it and go like, yeah, that'll be actually pretty good. Where this is like, okay, now somebody's gonna have to understand this is how this is going to be, right? So I don't want to say like don't do it, but I want to say it's going to take some additional work. And you have to be okay with doing the work. If you're willing to do the work, then opposites attract have stayed, right? The glue has stayed together. A lot of work, but it has stayed. So it's going to be about, is it worth it? Do you want to put the time in? Because it's going to be some time. Because what I mentioned earlier, like those two, structure versus action, that don't even fit in the same book, right? But could the opposites attract? Absolutely. Could they work out? Absolutely. But there's gonna definitely be a give and take. And the actionable one is gonna take a little bit more on the give and take because it's all about action, right? And so it can happen, but it will be work.
It's interesting. Like, okay, so here in the United States, I think I'm just going to throw a number out there that's kind of right, but I haven't checked it recently, but about 50% divorce rate, right? And then of course we all, but we all also know people who are unhappy in their marriages. And those are people who haven't been divorced. So let's assume for this hypothetical example that, of all the people who get married, 50% of them get divorced. And let's say maybe another 10, 15, 20% are actually staying together and they're unhappy. So of all the people in the United States that get married, we're now looking at 60, maybe 70% of people that are after a certain stage unhappy, either divorced or still married. Like, I think everyone needs a coach in their personal relationship. Yeah, because it's just a mess. Like, we're people who aren't getting help and who just think they can kind of do it on their own. Like, it's messy out there. And people are failing left and right. Yeah.
Visualize. This goes back to what I was just saying. Like if I took a couple who were struggling, I can have them both take it and I can tell you exactly why you're struggling. And they're going to go like, oh my God, that is true. That's exactly where our problem is. I know. So are you willing? And are you willing? If you're not,
time to walk away.
Well, I don't want to tell them that, but I'm like, this is what it is, right? This, if you can agree that this is why you're having the conflict and neither one of you are willing to say, you know what, I could do better and I could do better and I'm going to do better and I'm going to do better. So if that doesn't happen.
In dealing with business executives, you can probably say things like, that person probably shouldn't be working for you,
right,
or you should be not managing this. You should have someone else manage that. You should be managing this. But when it comes to work and personal relationships, like because you'd be like, you guys definitely should not be together.
No, I would. Yeah, I don't tell people what to do because there's always that probability that it can work.
Right.
Because I know what humans can do. Right. We all have seen triumphs of what humans can do. Right. People who have faith, we've seen what they can do. So it really is going to be about what your individual commitment is to the relationship and what you really want to see out of it. But if you go like, I'm not doing that, that's too much work.
Then it's too much work.
And it's too much work. Right?
And you get to be alone.
Yeah. You decided that, So no, I'm not definitely, again, we do it in a space where people get to have fun with it. And the good part is that a lot of people walk away with aha moments, right? They're like, oh my God, this is crazy how much it talks about how we are. And I now see why I don't understand you. And I understand why you do that. And it makes me so mad, but I get it now. Those simple things like that, because a lot of the conversations or the arguments are based off a very trivial thing.
Yeah, they always start small.
Then we pull back stuff from the past and all that other stuff because now we turn it into hurting, right? So we start out in the conversation of disagreement. Disagreement turns into hurting. And when you do that, now it gets messier and messier and messier. And we're not thinking about that because we're in the emotional space. Instead of us saying, you know what, I need a regroup moment. When it gets to that space, you got to go, you know what, we both need a pause. We both need to pause for a regroup moment. We both need to regroup because I don't want to say anything that is going to hurt you. And I don't want you to say anything that's going to hurt me. So can't we just agree to just take a moment and pause it and everybody go away, do what you got to do, breathe it out, talk it out to yourself, whatever you need to do, go in the bathroom and scream it out, whatever you got to do to get the energy level down, the emotional level down. So then you can really go like, oh my God, because it's crazy when you go to sleep and wake up how things are different, you know?
Yeah. Is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you might like to mention? Because I could keep asking you relationship advice forever.
No, I mean, I can give you some stuff about how to find us if you want me to share.
Yeah, I'd love to learn about how people can find you, whether you have any books or speaking events now in the area nearby, like anything that you want to just kind of share with the audience.
Speaking engagements, I think I just finished one. Nothing's probably gonna happen for a minute. So we do have our counseling and relationship conversations. So we have that on our website. So mkcircle.com. So www.mkcircle.com. They can find us there. You actually can even go onto our website and there's like a Start Your Journey button. You can click on that Start Your Journey button and actually have a 30-minute kind of intro conversation with me and decide if that's something you want to do. We're not doing any couple signups now. I think we'll be doing probably a couple signups somewhere in June. And so we can definitely get you that information back and throw that out there for us later. But we'll have that on our website if they want to keep checking back. We'll also have it on our social media, so you can follow us on MK Circle CEO on all the social media platforms. And so we will be putting out the relationship conversations. So we do those maybe every quarter, but it's building some momentum. So we might get to the point where we're doing them every other month and hopefully every month.
Yeah. And when I put this out, I'll tag you on all the social medias and stuff like that. That's no problem at all. I'll put the website on there as well. But I feel like
I do speaking engagements too. So I do come out if you wanted me to come and speak somewhere. You can definitely hire me to do that work because that's also, you can do the same to reach us on our website for that.
I feel like you're in a really interesting space because I just feel like society, the way we're developing, just the fast pace of the way everything's changing, it's just throwing us all such massive curveballs in our professional careers and our personal lives. And I feel like you're in a really good space to help people.
No, I love what I do. And my coaches are amazing. I just spoke with one today and I'm telling you, I really feel just blessed to have such great people who see the vision, who understand the theory and the curriculum. And I mean, every coach that I've hired goes like, man, you got it. Like I want to teach this. I want to do this work because you've made it where people can get it, and our success rates are just through the roof, right? We're at like 97.8% success rate, meaning that people are getting new jobs or their relationships are better, or they've heard from their boss, man, you're in a different place now. Or they have just said, the boss has said to me, because I happen to be coaching, that, oh my God, my team is different. My team is better. My team is definitely more intentional. And it's just amazing the shifts that are happening in the organizations and with the people that we're connected with. So it definitely is a testament to the work, a lot of research, right, that I've done. And I just think, I really believe that people can be better.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and you're coming along at the absolute right time. So glad you left higher education. Well, thank.
Last bond, they were like, man, if you just could have hung on, They were trying to get me in a presidency seat. I was like, absolutely not.
No, but this way you can help more people, right? Yeah, and that's where it's at. Thank you so much. So now we can go to here and we do this and we can look and shake hands so that everyone knows we're in the same damn room and we're not doing this by Zoom. Thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right. And we are